When observing the revered Nouvelle Vague, there are several filmmakers who remain the celebrated champions of the movement. From their mentor and debut vanguard Claude Chabrol, the early works of the highly creative Louis Malle, the designated left bank genius Hélène René, the sometimes uncomfortable but compositionally convicted character pieces of Eric Romer, the playfully disassembling disposition of Agnes Varda, the definitive iconoclast exploratory output of Jean-Luc Godard, the slightly later but incredibly impactful films of Jean Eustache, the ethereal epics of Jacques Rivette, the ingenious visionary Mr. Chris Marker, but most well known, perhaps, is our cherished friend François Truffaut, who would partially define the epoch with his landmark features The 400 Blows, Shoot the Piano Player, The Soft Skin, The Bride Wore Black, and, displayed here on this day, 1962's Jules at Gym. When I am considering the finest films from Mr. Truffaut, the titles which come to my mind would be Shoot the Piano Player, Two English Girls, The Green Room, perhaps Small Change, and most certainly this one of the most sheerly enjoyable of the Nouvelle Vague, Truffaut's films and of the acclaimed critics' canon generally. Jules at Gym is assertively idiosyncratic and rather alike many other films in the narrative tradition, although is not overtly inaccessible to an audience willing to watch something in black and white or with translating subtitles. Some may balk at the melancholic conclusion, although perhaps in the English-speaking world they might not appreciate what Jules at Gym, as a period piece, is aspiring to distill about the generations who came of age during or amidst the great wars of the early 20th century. I suspect younger Europeans may not get it now either, maybe the French still are. The one is not entirely aware, and how would they be, of the nature of relationships prior to the 60s, prior to contraceptives, and how people pursued more turbulent relationships, how it drove them mad, and how people's entire worlds were those who had been lovers with, at a time when it was far, far more unviable to encounter a desensitizing some. The Nouvelle Vague, or otherwise alternative crowd, appreciates this film possibly partly because of the comparatively expressionistic nature of its players, and how the cinematographic approach corresponds to their active psychologies by comparison to other drama pictures around it. They receive a certain emphasized romance and existential strife throughout the proceedings, and it effectively serves that function too, yet is also a film, or so it seems, about the more morbid truths and less binary realities of romantic attachments, especially at a time when they, at least appeared to be, far less emotionally disposable. Truffaut couldn't help but play the 20th century modernist novelist via his film's screenplays, although he employed the medium itself so assertively to correspond with his narratival gravity, much as the aforementioned novels attempted to devise methods of prose to enunciate the unique, sometimes lofty focuses of their text's subjects. This is from the 1001 movies you must see before you cark it. She wore rings on every finger, she sang the song, she wore a moustache and a fug cap, and she loved two men, one French, the other German, as the war was coming. She would love many more men before, after, and during that time, and bicycles were running fast on the curved roads of happiness. In the end there was death. Mr. Jules, Oscar Werner, and Mr. Jim, Henry Serre, opened the door to the magical summer of cinema's modernity, but they came from the summer of another modernity, one that occurred way back at the beginning of the 20th century, when Henry Pierre Roche lived this story and then wrote it as a diary. They opened the door, and Catherine, Jeanne Moreau, ran right through it, shining with grace and strength and faith in being human. She would win all the races on the bridge, even the one where the bridge ends in the middle. It would be a tragedy, but it was shown as slapstick. Never see Jules and Jim in a dubbed version. François Truffaut's voiceover is the sound of a wind that caresses and makes one world disappear, another world appear. The beauty of the black and white cinemascope is hardly large enough, delicate and nuanced enough, rooted in the origin and contemporary enough, contrasted enough to convey the vivid and subtle energy the film is made out of. Look at Moreau. Look how beautiful she is. Truffaut was in love with her. How could he not be? Jules and Jim was created from this love. It would have been impossible to make this movie without the obvious happiness of the director filming his actress, the strength they gave to each other. A shadow of sadness can be felt each time she leaves the frame, a thrill of joy and desire each time she enters it again. Cinema is the art of recording, not only the recording of objects, but also visual forms and sounds. It is also the recording of that distorted reality produced by powerful emotions. Jules and Jim records just such a distorted reality to an extraordinary extent. War was to come, as was delusion and death. The film knew it. Its black and white were also the colours of mourning. It was also Truffaut's third film, still made in the original impulse of the new wave, and yet after the autobiographical and child-centered The 400 Blows, 1959, and the avant-garde virtuoso game of Shoot the Piano Player, 1960, Jules and Jim signalled a more adult and middle-of-the-road effort without losing any of the young and disruptive energy of the revolution he and his accomplices had just launched in world cinema, and at least during this brief moment, that is exactly what happened. Truffaut's third film kept alive a moment of turbulence that would never come again, a jump into the future with love.